Okay, so here I am at the Pacific University tournament, and so I forgot to bring my tripod with me, so this is going to be a little bit wobbly, but I want to share with you some of the things that it's kind of a smart idea to do when you're at a tournament. I just finished judging a round of Informative, and it was something. One of the students gave a speech about 3D printing, and one of her visual aids was a Colt 45 that she 3D printed herself, and so I made sure I gave her very positive feedback the whole way through, because I didn't know she had any 3D printed bullets. And one of the things I want to share that I think is a good idea is you want to, throughout the day when you're at a tournament, you want to hit the sweet spot between burning your energy and letting your energy dissipate. There are two problems that I see competitors, two mistakes I see competitors commonly make. One of them is that they run around and that they're hyper, and they use up all their energy and they tend to crash near the end of the day. But another one is that someone points out to them the foolishness of doing that, and so they spend their time doing a lot less. They spend their time sitting around talking, sitting around listening to music, and the problem with that is you let your energy dissipate. The sweet spot in the middle is to be focused, but not hyperactive. So what you should have is you should have an ongoing list of things to do that are productive. Maybe what that is you are going to spend the next 15 minutes cutting updates, or you're going to spend the next 15 minutes writing out answers to an argument, or you're going to spend the next 15 minutes taking a close look at a platform that you're doing and thinking of tweaks for it. Or you're going to take 15 minutes and go have a conversation with one friend of yours, but at the end of 15 minutes you're going to change gears and do something else. It's not going to be open-ended. So one of the wrinkles to this is you have to make sure that there are things that if they are interrupted because the postings go up, it's not a crisis. So you have to be a little bit smart in what you put on your to-do list. But if the day is split up into I did something, I saw the fruits of my labor, I saw my accomplishments, I had several pages of updates that I was then able to use, I had pages of answers to an argument I was going to deal with, I had increased confidence in my platform, and you're doing things all day long, then you don't let your energy drain away, but you also don't let your energy burn away. And by the end of the day, you should really have a sense of satisfaction, and your energy level should still be fairly high because you've conserved it and protected yourself from losing it in either direction. So that's thing number one. Thing number one is don't burn your energy, don't dissipate your energy, stay focused throughout the day with a rolling list of things to do. Get your coaches and your teammates to help you with what's another good thing to do for a little bite of time, and always have a thing to do in order to maintain your focus. And I'll be back later on with more smart things to do when you are at a tournament. Okay, me again. A second smart thing to do at tournaments, I have known a lot of people who think there's a distinction between practice and then performance at tournaments, and practice is where you learn and performance is where you show it off and you actually do it, and that's the wrong way to think about it. The way you ought to think about your rounds of competition at the tournament, those are the learning under the real conditions, because as I assume you already know, practice is not a substitute for what you actually do when you're at the tournament, when you're in the competition room and you got the judge in front of you. So what you do about that, every event you have, try to have a limited short list of objectives, specific things you're going to improve about that piece, about that event. If the objectives seem pretty attainable, then have more than one, but don't have more than about 3. More than 3 and you get scattered and you start to forget some of them. If the objective seems pretty far away and you're going to have to whittle down a mountain, then just have 1. And if you go into the first round of the tournament and you nail it and you make a huge step forward, then spend the other rounds trying to consolidate the progress you've made. If you go in the first round and you struggle with what you're trying to improve, whether it's eliminating ums, whether it's really getting the emotion right in one part of your interp, whether it's using a particular kind of support in impromptu, you go into that first round and you don't quite get it, right after that round is over, take a look at what you did and figure out exactly what the adjustments you're going to make for the second round, and try to make steady progress through each of the rounds. If you do that, if you have an eye on at the tournament, I am going to learn, I am going to take each of these competition rounds as learning opportunities, then that's when you get the most out of them. This is so weird. I feel like I'm doing video selfies, like I should be saying how I feel about poor Justin Bieber and I should be 13 years old or something. At any rate, something that I'm a big believer in that I tell my own team members about is that you need to know your introduction backwards and forwards. When we do vocal warm-ups every morning at a tournament, we run through the introductions to make sure that you can be very, very confident and very familiar and very, very fluent, and you need real strong familiarity with your introduction to pull off the tip I'm about to give you, which there's a principle of effective speaking that one of these days I need to make a longer video about, which is the balance of commitment between your commitment to your material and the commitment to the audience. And one thing that it's good at a tournament to take one quick moment and do, and I've seen a couple of speakers I've judged already this morning do this, is when you come up to the front of the room, be fully present to the judge, really see the judge, take a close look at the judge, form an impression, maybe even form a sentence describing the judge in your mind, and with that, filling up your mind, begin your speech. Now you can only do that if you really know your introduction, but you can start off on the foot of taking into account, observing fully the person you're speaking to, all the while you take this very carefully crafted message and you can blend the two together. But what I see too many people do is, for about the first minute of the speech, they are so concentrated on doing a good job on the material that their delivery is robotic and it's distancing and detaching. And the few people that I've seen who I thought were really seeing me and not looking inside their head to make the words come out, those have been the people who make a powerful first impression on me. So I would recommend that if you do know your introduction that well, then when you get up to begin the speech, take just a second, really see the judge, form an impression, study him like you're a detective studying a crime scene. Well, maybe a little bit more lovingly than that. I've heard some homeschool forensics people occasionally say that they take 1 second just to say a prayer for the judge, which that might be a way of doing it, but then treat the first part of the speech as the fusion between delivery of the message and connecting with that rhetorical audience that's in front of you. This is just a very quick and simple tip. Don't underestimate the value of getting outside, especially when you get to the point in the tournament where you're waiting for things to happen. If the tab room gets to where they're a little bit behind and it's sort of open-ended and you feel the time dragging on you, it's well established, well backed up by research that nature sounds and just being around trees and grass. I'm not even talking about going out and throwing the football around or the frisbee because, remember, you don't want to burn up all your energy, but just take the soothing effect of not being under artificial fluorescent light, and that can do you a lot of good. Mama, I'm in a debate tournament, and I'm so scared. Sorry, just having a Blair Witch Project moment there. So here I am back in the hotel room, and one of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing is that you have your daily rituals, and you are taking not only the lessons you're learning, but you're taking the lessons that everybody else is learning as well. And what my students have got used to is I have a set of questions at the end of every day. And the questions, it depends on whether it's mid-tournament or the end of the tournament. And the first question is, what's the best argument you made today? And that's for people who are in debate. It's also for people doing extemp. And once we've gone through a round of that, we also talk to the interpers and the platformers. What's the finest moment you were able to bring off today? And then the next question is, what's the best argument or finest moment you saw from one of your competitors? And then what we do is we talk about it and we analyze it. And for the arguments, we think about, well, what would you have done with this answer? Well, how do you think you would have fended off this answer? What would have been the best way to take down that argument? Then, if we're still mid-tournament, the follow-up question is, what's your top priority for something you want to achieve tomorrow? And then, if it's at the end of the tournament, the question is, if there's one situation from this tournament that you could go back and you could redo, what would it be? And that's the jumping off point for talking about how to reach those objectives. And I would assume that just about every team, just about every competitor has something that you do to make sure that you are gathering up all the lessons. You don't just go to a tournament and then get the ballots at the end and that's it. But one of the reasons I think it's kind of important to do that in a group, you can benefit not only from the lessons that you yourself are collecting, but not only do you learn from the lessons that you hear your teammates talk about, but you can also get an idea of where your teammates' strengths are and where their struggles are, and you can have those moments during the tournament where you can give them some encouragement or a tip or an idea, and you reinforce that reality that you are not competing by yourself, that the team is cohesive and organic and you are all learning and improving together, and as one of you gets better, you all get better. So if you don't have repetitive, if you don't have institutionalized, I can't find a good word for this, if you don't have rituals that you do that point you in the direction of those goals that everybody recognizes and that are pretty well established, then it's worth the time to think up how you want to do that so that you aren't losing all that opportunity for benefit every time you go to a tournament. And I'm doing this in the hotel because we often tend to do ours in the hotel because that's the end of the day when we get to decompress a little bit from the time crunch of the tournament. So try that out. Okay, so the last two tips I have both have to do with not getting too caught up with your powerful emotions at a tournament. The first one is try to be sure that you are mindful of where you are and who's around you, especially when you're doing things like going up or down stairways or opening or closing doors, especially when the postings have just gone up and maybe you know who you're about to debate, or maybe you've just made the semis or finals and you're really, really excited. This is something I've seen play out a bunch of times over the weekend. Someone will go thundering by, someone will trip over someone will bump into someone, they'll be embarrassed for about 1 second, and then maybe 10, 15 minutes later they realize that person they slammed the door on is their judge. And I have known other people who have a real gift, and it's one that they've cultivated, that no matter how excited they are, they then put on an extra layer of vigilance, and they look around, and they monitor what's going on around them, and they just have fewer embarrassing moments like that, and you don't need anything throwing you off your game, rattling you, or undermining your confidence. So that's something to have on your list of skills to develop for when you're at a tournament. The other one's very similar to it, and I chiefly think of it in terms of events where you have a partner, and that is work on the ability to break the tension, especially if your partner has a moment where she or he might need the tension broken with another competitor, and I have a story to tell about that one. This happened in the final round of the national debate tournament back when I was in college, and my teammates, Danny and Marty, they were in the finals. They were negative against the University of Michigan, and this, for whatever reason, did not make it into the transcript. I mean, a little of it did. What happened in the middle of Marty's 2NC is in the transcript, but the exchange afterward didn't. Marty's giving the 2NC, and so he's debating Michigan on solvency, and he gets to one of the 2AC solvency arguments, and he can't remember what the words on his flow mean. So he looks over at Michigan and says, "What is this argument?" And Andrew Schrank, the 1A, says, "Doesn't assume the demographic transition." So Marty starts to answer that. Andrew all of a sudden realizes to his horror that he told Marty wrong, so he speaks up and says, "No, Marty, I'm sorry. Doesn't assume the demographic trap, the trap." And Marty says loudly, "All right, Andrew." Not as in, I'm angry that you told me the wrong argument, because that's a genuine accident, but as in, I'm in the middle of my speech and seconds count. And this woo went around the room. So Marty finishes the speech, and it's about to be time for Joe Thompson, the 2A, to cross-ex him. And Andrew says, "Marty, I'm sorry. That was really a mistake. I did not mean to tell you the wrong argument." And Marty, a little embarrassed and trying to save face in front of a room full of people in the middle of the final round of the NDT, he says, "Well, I just don't need someone preaching a whole sermon at me while I'm trying to get my 2NC." And Danny, his partner, looks up at the two of them from where he's prepping and says, "You two are so competitive." And the whole room just goes up and the moment passed. If you can do that, if you can watch for moments where you can come up with a joke or something like that both of them are in on, that is not a joke at anyone's expense, you can break some of those tense moments. And those tense moments, if they're not handled well, or if they escalate, or for whatever reason, if they're mismanaged, those can be the kinds of things that spoil some of the finer moments of the tournament a little bit. So that's one where you can, with a little bit of skill development, really, it's almost a ministry. It's a way to make sure that people don't miss out on the opportunities they should be having in forensics. Well, we are wrapping up our time here, and so I hope that some of these tips for what to do at tournaments have been helpful, and we will be back next week with other things for the vlog that have application, we hope, for you.